I don't know about you, but I feel like I've almost had blinders on when we're thinking about this. It's like, oh man, he's coming to the end of this contract. This is really exciting.
Sure.
And now we're on the other end of it. And none of these fights interest me.
No.
You weren't here with us on the Fight Companion the other night. What did you think about Diaz's performance?
Overall, it's pretty good. I mean, considering both men perhaps past their prime at this point, it was an entertaining fight, a mixed martial arts fight, and he got the job done. 2:09 on the clock, Jason. Did they script that? Are we in a simulation?
Yeah, I think I saw the Joe Rogan post about that too. Well, then, so like, great ending, probably the best ending you could have possibly gotten. There was all this speculation that they were trying to give him this bad fight so that when he leaves the UFC, he's going to look bad. They're going to be able to say, like what they said about Verdun when he was in Strikeforce. Oh, he lost when he was in our promotion, so he's not that great. But of course, he won. None of that happens. He didn't even have to fight Khamzat. So my question is, so we know he's a big star in the UFC, and we know there are plenty of people for him to fight there as well, but who the hell is he going to fight outside of the UFC?
Who knows,
and
man.
I mean any sport.
I mean, like you could pick anyone. There's not a lot of people out there. If you look at different promotions, like there are like organizations around, but really like PFL, who's there? I mean, that's a whole season. It's not likely he's going to take any one of those guys who are already registered on a roster and do an off fight with them. They've got some ex-UFC stars. That's their biggest talent. That's not really going to happen. Maybe the BKFC thing is a likely scenario, but that's agreeing to enter into a more ruthless version of a sport he could make some money in. So I think most people would say it's a boxing fight, right?
Did you say more ruthless or more meaningless?
It's more, okay, right. It's either way for you, isn't it? I mean, Jesus. But
I'm not a big bare
I think most people would say, oh,
Knuckle.
yeah, oh, Jake Paul, he's next, isn't he? But he's got to fight Anderson Silva first. That's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably the one fight to do. People have talked about Conor, but Conor is actually like, I don't know why he would want to do that as a boxing fight.
If he wanted to fight Conor, he could have just done it. Like, Conor's injured, but like, you know what I mean? Like,
here's one thing I really like about so back in the day, before the UFC was kind of the monopolistic, I'm careful with my words, allegedly monopolistic. That's not how you say that. Monopolistic?
Well, I think there's a difference between a monopoly and a misophony or whatever it's called. So it's two.
Okay, so monopsony, I said they are, which is what they're being sued for. Monopoly is the alleged part.
Okay.
Because that's not really quite the same.
Too complicated for me, Jason.
Yeah. So those are two different statements that I was trying to say. But the point is, before the UFC was taking over as the global super powerhouse, there was pride as a competitor. And one of the things that stars used to do is Fedor used to do one-fight contracts. And on those one-fight contracts, he would go wherever the hell he wanted. Because like Inoki Boombaye and all this kind of stuff that he did in 2003, he wouldn't have been able to do that under a UFC contract. You can't do that nowadays. But the one thing Diaz has on his side now is he doesn't work for the UFC anymore. So if he wants to, he can say, all right, I'll come back, I'll fight Conor, but under my terms. And if the fight falls through, I don't have to renew. I don't have to do any of this stuff. Sunset clause, I can back out anytime I want. It's just once I've agreed to the fight, and that's it.
I don't want to look past like the initial discussion, but if he does do his thing, comes back to the UFC, do you think they'll give him a one-fight contract? They might try and lock him in for 3.
I think he could do it now.
You think he could do it now? I think a lot of people have said in the lead up to this one, if Diaz wins, the UFC will try and re-sign him.
Yeah.
But that was more if he beats Chimaev and takes out this star.
Yeah.
But he didn't do that. He beat Tony, so...
Oh, the UFC wants to re-sign him. He's a big cash cow.
I think they'll probably make a play.
I mean, they just made a pay-per-view off of his name, and notice who kept the main event, you know? True. In some instances, Khamzat, despite being the villain, despite being the bad guy, he would still be the one they'd put in the main event because they'd have to. He'd be the marquee guy, but there was a marquee guy bigger than him with proven numbers, 1.6 million pay-per-view buys with Conor. Like, he has that under his record, 1.3, I think it was, in the first one, or 1.5, I think the first one was. And he's a proven track record. He's been on so many cards. He's headlined so many cards. He's got that star level. He just has that behind him.
I think you're right. I mean, the ball is in his court, certainly, for old Nate Diaz, which is nice to see. But we've got to bring this back to the discussion that you might not enjoy, but everyone wants to know. Like,
who does he fight?
Okay, who does he fight? Because you got Jake.
That's why we're having the discussion.
I get it, but so let's bring it back around to
let's
bring it back to the boxing angle between Jake and Anderson, because
that part, yeah.
Jake Paul's star, whatever you want to call it, it's burning somewhat, I guess, depending on your, like, you know, respect level for that guy. Some people, you know, don't know the difference between the two brothers, I've heard, purposefully. But if Jake loses, I think Anderson Silva, is still on the table, potentially. Depends who promotes it. Eddie Hearn will probably get behind that, wouldn't he? Or maybe Nate promotes it himself in some old weird thing. I don't know what's going to happen. But I don't think, you know, I think if Jake loses, there's still another option there in Anderson Silva in a boxing fight. Question is, would it be more popular or would it sell more if they actually had a UFC fight in the UFC on the top of a pay-per-view, or if they had their own boxing fight?
Wait, if who had
Anderson and Nate. Do you think it would do better if that fight was in the UFC or in boxing?
Like, for me, there's not really an interest in that fight.
Right. So
I
it's
would
Logan
not be...
Paul or bust.
Well, it's not Logan Paul or bust. I mean...
In that scenario, I'm just talking about within that boxing scenario.
Oh, within just specifically those two opponents?
Yeah, within specifically that situation.
No, I think it's more of a Jake Paul situation there. If Jake
I keep saying Logan? So apparently I don't know the difference between the two guys either. I mean,
you're talking about Silva, and I was about to start broadening it out to the larger boxing crowd. So
okay,
but like, yeah, I think Jake Paul, he's the one that he would be more interested in. I think that would sell the most. I think there's a reason why this is Jake Paul who's at the headlining of it. I don't think there was too much done in the Vitor. The Tito Silva fight. I don't think there was too much done in terms of numbers there. There's a reason why the money is going in Jake Paul's direction, because he's the star, to be honest, at this day and age. If it was Anderson Silva in his prime, it'd be in a different route. If he was leaving the UFC in his prime, that would have been a different story. I just don't think there's as much interest in it. Don't get me wrong, they might still try to do it.
I feel like, I don't know. I feel like Nate Diaz versus Anderson Silva in some kind of crazy boxing fight, it might sell a little bit. It might sell more than you think, just because Nick's for Anderson, you know.
Well, it might sell more than you think, but it won't sell as much as... So I agree. That was why I was talking about broadening it out. So I don't want to see a Canelo fight. But every fighter under the sun that has any boxing ability whatsoever, including Usman, who is known for having a decent jab, to be fair... He really wanted to fight Canelo, and everybody would have seen that as a squash match. Masvidal was calling for it. Yeah. It's like the sweepstakes. If you want a big boxing fight, somebody like Nate would want that. He would have a lot of advantages in terms of height and reach, but I mean, I don't want to see that fight. I don't think that would end well for him with that kind of power and that kind of speed that he has. So,
what about these like crazy promotions? Not crazy, I didn't mean to say that. What about these other promotions like Eagle FC, something like that? A one-off deal with Habib pops in there, 165 title. You know, he's always wanted to fight that weight class. You can fight Kevin Lee. It might be fun.
Yeah.
Diego Sanchez has fought that. You know what I mean?
Well, so like, I don't know about you, but I feel like I've almost had blinders on when we're thinking about this. It's like, oh man, he's coming to the end of this contract. This is really exciting. And now we're on the other end of it. And none of these fights interest me. Like, not a single one of them.
Why the hell would he go to Eagle FC and fight Kevin Lee when he could just stay in the UFC?
Yeah.
Like,
but they had the predatory contracts. He had to wear those rock shoes that he didn't want to wear. And they're not getting paid for that at all, which is crazy to me. Like, at least through all the other apparel deals that they've done, they've gotten a cut of that. Like, it's not as much as people wanted, but they've gotten it. Here you're getting literally nothing. You're having to wear it. And then you have all these ESPN deals, all these other things. So I guess that is the other part of it, though. What I'm interested, what you're interested in, what we're interested in as a fan base might not matter, because there'll always be at least another fans on the other side of that equation that are just happy to see Nate Diaz fight whoever the hell he fights.
True.
And if he does have that promoter, you know, he started up that promotion that he's doing, that works really well in his favor, because then all that stuff stacks on his side. That might mean putting up a little bit more of the money, but it also means they get to take away a line share. We know Tyron Woodley got $3 million against Jake Paul.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was looking at it this morning. I'm not sure if that was for the second fight or the first fight combined. But either way, you split that in half and say that was true, or it was $3 million just for one of them. Jesus Christ. Like, that's enough. And for somebody like that, I mean, I feel like he's probably already set for life from what he does and what he's already done. But then you stack that on top of it, and it's like, good Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. When you look at like, oh, there are all these options, it's like, no, not really. I mean, you've got the boxing world of Jake Paul, maybe BKFC, just because they have shown that they're paying people millions, like Paige Van Zandt, people like that. They literally paying millions for certain fights. So there might be an opportunity there just because of the paycheck. Again, the only opponent really, Mike Perry. I would watch that fight. I think it could be a spectacle. I mean, the Artem Lobov-Paulie Malignaggi fight, that got some hype behind it, at least between like, you know, like the hardcore community, just because it's a fun, crazy matchup, you know. So like, I feel like there is an element of the MMA fan base that crosses over into BKFC.
Sure, yeah,
perhaps
absolutely.
even arguably, I don't know if it's more or less than the Jake Paul side of thing, just in terms of the crossover from MMA. But I think realistically, you got the boxing and you got possibly BKFC, or he just shows back up in the UFC in 2 years and fights somebody else. But if he picks up a few wins, let's say he goes beats Jake Paul, then does some stupid crazy thing, you know, beats some pro boxer, I don't know, it could be anyone. Then when he does come back, like you said, he might get a freaking title shot or something ridiculous, you know, or he could just fight Conor. Depends who the champion is.
Not on board.
What if there's nobody left? What if Dustin Poirier leaves and then they have their actual fight somewhere else?
Well, see, that was going to be my next question. Will someone follow him into this world? Because here's the thing. When was the last time GSP fought?
And then when he fought Bisping?
Yeah, that was 5 years ago.
Oh, I could fight GSP.
Sunset clauses, and this is something I've heard GSP at least mildly allude to in some of his interviews, that a sunset clause may be upon us. And he's been staying in shape this whole time. We know he tried to quit the UFC, or at least try to say he was a free agent in 2016. All that crazy shit with Dana White saying he wasn't a fighter and going back and forth.
Yeah, it was kind of weird.
There's respect back and forth between them. I think GSP is not a burning bridges type kind of person. But I also think he's a very smart, intelligent person who knows that the moment that's up, he can go out there and make money with someone like Nate Diaz, and the history with their brothers,
or just
poisoned, all that crazy shit that went down.
Take the karate combat title. I'm joking, he wouldn't do that.
The karate combat title. I mean, you never know. There's a lot of options.
Right? That is kind of interesting. The GSP angle as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not sure where Habib is in close to his as well.
If you open up the GSP box, you might as well open up the Habib box, but I think that's closed.
I think the Habib it's much more closed than the GSP one for sure. But the options, you know, could start opening, and there might be some people. He might already have some plans.
Dan Hardy.
Dan Hardy. He's got the Diego Sanchez. Wait, that already happened?
No, it hasn't.
When is that?
It got delayed.
Oh, it got delayed.
I don't know when
okay.
it is.
I was like, I feel like it was supposed to have happened by now. But yeah, I mean, there are some stars out there, but man, he's going to need a big name to get him up in the morning or something like that.
Yeah. Has he timed this well? Do you think? Do you think he should have got out a bit earlier?
I don't think it was up to him.
I know, but like, I'm just asking, do you think this is timed well relatively in terms of the available options around him right now?
You mean just the circumstances are timed well? Because he couldn't have chosen it.
If it was 6 months ago,
yeah,
let's say, then, you know, he might be fighting Jake Paul now instead of Anderson Silva.
Yeah, but he just didn't have a choice.
No, he didn't have a choice.
His contract was when it started, so 5 years ago, that's a tough thing.
5? Jesus.
It might be 3 years even, actually. But still, yeah, I guess that's the one kind of takeaway from this discussion. I don't know about you. I just don't know who the hell is going to fight. It's Jake Paul if he wins, and then anybody else is just kind of like, he'll probably still make good money just being him, the star he is. But I don't know who it's going to be against.